And we get it rolling on the Krueger Show on a Friday. Beautiful weather in Northern California. We're here to talk little Niners. Jack Hammer's in the house. We're brought to you by Piggin' Up Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're two locations. They're open 7 days 7 days a week in Marin County from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. They're open Wednesday through Sunday in Emeryville. Piggin' Up Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. And, of course, also brand new sponsor, MarinAutoglass.com, 415-883-3030. And as you can see in the four corners of the screen, we've been brought to you from the outset, brought by the great company, New York Style Sausage Company. They make phenomenal sausage. Get it in every market you can find around Northern California and really throughout the greater part of California, in any part, SoCal, NorCal. Dan Cochimilio told me the other day he bought some New York style Italian sausage in Arizona. So they're out there, and all I got to say is it's the best. So try it. You'll love it. You'll be a fan for life. Jack, good to see you, man. How are you?
I'm great. It's Friday. Excited to be on here again. We've been doing this on a regular basis. It's always a lot of fun. So I'm doing really good today. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic. In fact, we've kind of settled into a Friday here at 11 a.m. Time slot and loving it. And I love rapping Niners with you. I talk a lot of Niners. I did a 3-way stream last night with Vish and Jesse. The coach is going to be on in the morning, where I'm doing a thing this weekend with Marcelino McCrary Ball. I'm really excited about that. So we're counting it down, less than 3 weeks until training camp begins, at least with the rookies reporting. And let's start off with the title of the stream. I titled it, "What's Fair and What's Foul," as far as the blame game that surrounds Kyle Shanahan. And to me, I'll just quickly kind of put my cards on the table. I don't understand the blame game with Kyle Shanahan. Maybe it's because I remember sitting there next to John Lund in the press box as, in the Chip Kelly era. Maybe it's because I remember the Tom Sula era, or the very end of the Harbaugh era, or basically the years pre-Harbaugh, Singletary, Nolan, that I look at Kyle Shanahan as a breath of fresh air. They've been in 3 of the last 4 NFC championship games. They've been, a competitive team. The one thing I always point to with a head coach is, does your team show up and play every Sunday, or do they show up, a third of the time kind of flat or unprepared or just looking like they're not ready to go? And the one thing I can say about Shanahan's team, really throughout his entire tenure, they don't have too many dogs. They don't have too many games where you watch and you're like, man, they really emotionally no-showed. He doesn't seem like the fire and brimstone guy, but I don't know if it's the players they draft or the tone he sets, but I feel like they show up and play pretty damn hard every Sunday.
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing that you can say about a head coach when you're talking about the positive job that they're doing is, you go back through Kyle Shanahan's career, and it's like 2018 in Tampa Bay was a no-show, right? But since then, it's really hard. 2020 against the Dolphins at Levi Stadium. But other than those 2 games, it's very rare to see that you can go back and you can point to a game where they just were completely flat, not in it at all, couldn't get it together beyond those 2 games. And I think that speaks volumes. I think the other thing, I think people lose track of, they look at his overall record, and his overall record is decent. It's not great. But that's really kind of dropped by what happened in 2017 and 2018 when he was in the process of rebuilding a roster that was at the bottom of the NFL. You look at what they've done since 2019 over the last 4 years. They have the 4th most wins in the NFL. They've been to a Super Bowl, back-to-back NFC championship games, and probably would have been to, the playoffs 4 straight years if it hadn't been for the Garoppolo injuries in 2020. So overall, I think they've done a terrific job of turning this thing around. And does he deserve some blame at times? Absolutely. But to the extent that which we're seeing this offseason, I think it's become a little bit of overkill. I like to kind of pick and choose my spots when it comes to that kind of stuff. And a lot of what I'm hearing right now just doesn't really mesh with where I think the 49ers are.
And if you're in the chat and you want to fire away your opinion, I mean, if you're a Niner fan, you're probably here watching this, and if you're a Niner fan, you probably have an opinion on Kyle Shanahan. Where do you sit? Is there any criticism of Kyle? Is it fair? Is it foul? How do you feel about him? Greg Iscon says fair is constructive criticism if it's coming from someone with firsthand knowledge of the situation. Foul is calling for his firing, blaming him for injuries, and the rest of that poppycock. I got to start using poppycock. I'm not using poppycock as much as I probably should.
That's a great word.
Exactly. As far as the injury thing, there are people that say, well, the Niners have had all these injuries. Why is it the Niners? Is it something they're doing? I don't know. I don't see that. I will say this. We're getting ready for camp, and this is the coach that I think Shanahan gets compared to the most is Sean McVay, because they're both offensive coaches. They're both young guys. And McVay's got two Super Bowl appearances and one Super Bowl win now. Shanahan has, one Super Bowl appearance and one Super Bowl defeat as the head coach of the 49ers. But to me, the one interesting aspect of McVay versus Shanahan in that debate is the way they approach the preseason. Shanahan says he's a little bit more old school and says, we're going to put our guys out there and we're going to roll the dice and we're going to see how it goes. And we're going to just do it the way it used to be done and always has been done, the way his father did it, and the way they're doing it the same way to this day. Where McVay takes an extreme kind of approach, which is we're not going to play our top guys even a snap in the preseason at all. And we'll give away a little rustiness to make sure that all of our money, let's say, is on the field come week one. And it's two different approaches. And I don't know which one's the right approach. But to me, that's kind of interesting that, McVay says, I'm not going to put Aaron Donald out there. I'm not going to play Matthew Stafford. And if we're rusty in week one, so be it. Where Shanahan's a little bit more like coaches of yesteryear where, hey, you know what? We're going to play the schedule. We're going to be smart about it, but we're going to get guys regular looks in all three preseason games. And if they get hurt, they get hurt. What do you think?
Yeah. And I think, well, for me, when you look at that, I think that there's one of the things where I differ with you a little bit is I think that his training camp practices could be a little bit more physical. I wasn't there during the Harbaugh year, so I can't really compare from what I've seen. All I can go off is what I've heard, and what I heard is that those Kyle Shanahan the practices of Jim Harbaugh at that time were very physical, and that the practices now under Kyle Shanahan not quite as much. So I wonder if that has a little bit though to do with some of these injuries that we're seeing in terms of they're just not hitting enough at that point to really kind of build up that callus that they need for the regular season. And the other thing that I've heard, and I kind of think that this could be, is just how quickly these practices are going through, and maybe you need to slow it down just a little bit to make sure everybody's getting the proper rest in between reps and that kind of thing. But other than that, it's hard to really say exactly what's going on. But there's definitely seems to have been an issue with injuries under Kyle Shanahan's tenure here in San Francisco. That's one of those where I kind of put a little bit of blame on him, and I think it also has to do with just the organization and the type of players that they're bringing in.
Damian Lee says Kyle's a good OC, but coach, he's not in my Yoda voice. Okay, so there you go. He's not a fan. We got this one from Harold. He says Kyle's going through the Andy Reid phase. Andy Reid right now, I think you'd say is on top of the coaches. Any coaching ranking should have Reid number one, the way his teams have performed and what he's gotten done in Kansas City. And Andy Reid, if you go back and look at his Philadelphia tenure, he was either one game over or one game under 500 in the playoffs. So Kyle Shanahan is way over 500 in the playoffs. He got to a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. He got to one step from the Super Bowl with a 7th round draft choice quarterback. So I don't know. I mean, personally, I look at it this way. Two things. One, I've already stated, does your team play? Does your team bring energy? I think they do. The other thing is, on your side of the ball, do you demonstrate a level of expertise that would make your players confident in you? And there's no doubt in my mind that Kyle Shanahan's offense produces points. To to me, if there was anything that was kind of like where a guy was a fraud, I felt like Jim Harbaugh being painted as this offensive guru was a fraud. He was a modern day Bo Schembechler. He had a great coaching staff. He drove his players hard, but his offense didn't always produce points, and it was a very conservative, run-oriented offense, somewhat unimaginative. They couldn't get plays always called in on time. Jim would lose his composure on the sidelines in big moments often. So but I look at Shanahan's offense and I say, you know what? His offense works. And do his players believe in his offense? Hell yes, they do. And then I also look at the defensive players. How do the players on the opposite side of your expertise feel about you? And the defensive players seem to be almost, when I talk to them in the locker room, they're almost the most glowing of Shanahan. They're some of the best things I've heard about Kyle as far as reviews from the players don't even come from the offensive players. They come from the defensive players who are looking across the line of scrimmage at his offense in practice and are coming away, pretty consistently impressed. So, that's my barometer on it. But there's an awful lot of people that point to a lot of things. Now, one criticism that I do have would be last year's NFC Championship game. The 49ers went into that game with one quarterback. Why not have a backup quarterback? They went in with Josh Johnson as their number 2 quarterback. Why not Jacob Eason? Why Josh Johnson? There was nobody out there that was better. And then Josh looked sincerely not prepared to play. Why was he not prepared to play? Or is that, I mean, did you look at that as just a statement about Josh and his lack of readiness? I mean, he's a veteran. Is it up to him to get himself ready to play? Or do you think that there's some negligence on the part of Kyle and the offensive staff for either not having another quarterback at the ready or having Josh in a better preparation state? Because as soon as Purdy went down, that game was done.
I look at that, and in terms of the quarterback position in the NFC Championship game, I put that on Kyle Shanahan, but not necessarily the way that you're putting it on. Josh Johnson's Josh Johnson. He's going to get into that situation, and he's not going to perform as well as Brock Purdy because he's not as good as Brock Purdy. There's a reason why he had bounced all over the league, and so they got stuck with him. If I'm going to put some blame on Kyle Shanahan for the way that game played out, it's at the end of the first half. You're only down by 7. You've been struggling and scrapping your way through, but you're only down by 7. You have an opportunity. You have the ball at the end there. You have the opportunity to just get into the halftime down by only 7 points. You're going to get the ball to start the second half, get into the locker room and get yourself all righted and ready to go. Instead, what does he do? He goes for it with Josh Johnson. I think, I can understand why he might be saying that, or make that decision, because I've heard Kyle Shanahan quite a bit talk about how in that 2-minute situation that makes it a little bit easier sometimes for the quarterback and what have you. But, I think he got caught up in the moment right there. You had the completion from Johnson to Samuel on first down that Samuel almost bust for a touchdown. And then it's like, okay, now we're rolling. What I'm doing here is making sense. And we go do it again. And, Johnson drops the ball. That you can't really blame Shanahan for Johnson dropping the ball. But instead, I would rather have just seen him take the ball, take a knee, get in at halftime, come back out, get everybody, together, and then come back out on the field. I think that would have been a better approach. But really quick, if I can, on that Andy Reid thing that Harold talked about, that's spot on, I think, because if everybody right now, Andy Reid is looked at as the best head coach in the game. Well, when he was in Philadelphia, he wasn't. He was everything that we hear people say about Kyle Shanahan is what people were saying about Andy Reid.
Can't win the big one.
Right. He's a terrific offensive mind, terrific coach, yada, 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 just can't win the big one. And it didn't happen for him until 2019. And I think so from that standpoint, that makes a ton of sense, as to why Harold would make that comment. And I agree with him. I do think he's kind of going through that phase. And then the second piece that you were talking about was how the defensive players respect Kyle Shanahan. And I'll take that one further. I'll say this is that part of the reason the 49ers have such a strong roster, one of the reasons why they're so good offensively, defensively throughout their roster is that John Lynch knows exactly what Kyle Shanahan wants at every position across his team. whether it's the center, whether it's the defensive tackle, whether it's the strong safety. He knows the type of player he wants, what they're expecting out of those guys, and they go out and get them. And I think that's something about Kyle Shanahan that just goes completely unnoticed. Is it's not just what he's doing X's and O's wise. He knows exactly what he wants everywhere. They go out and get the players to do it, and it's not just happening out of luck. They have a plan, and they continue to execute on a very high level.
Yeah, yeah. I think those are really, really strong points. Kaushik Narayan, and Kaushik, if I butcher that, may apologize. Throws in a super chat for $2. Thank you, Kaushik. And then he comes back with this comment. He says, surprised by the fascination with the Super Bowl win. The Rams won 2 years ago, and are now in a rebuild for the next two. Consistency and playoff success is more important. From 1990 through 1998, the 49ers won the Super Bowl one time. I think that's a really, really good point. I like the Niners' approach to team building more than the Rams' approach. The Rams were like, we're all in. We're going to sprint at this thing as fast as we can. They got it done, but then they had to probably shut it down for at least a year. We'll see what they do this year. A lot of people feel like they'll have to tear it all the way down to the studs before they're ready to contend again for a Super Bowl. And I like the fact that virtually every year the 49ers are in go for it mode. They've been in the top 5 of the Super Bowl favorites almost every year in the last, 3 or 4. And I like that level of consistency. I think it's good. I think it's a healthier deal. I think it's better for the fans. I don't like giving away, entire seasons. If you want to give away an entire season in year 1 of a rebuild, okay, we can live with that. It's life. It's the way it is. But, after that, it's pro sports, the tickets cost the same, and I don't want, they went for it this 1 year and then they didn't go for it these 4 years. And then it's like, what are you, the San Diego Padres of the NFL? It's like, we're going to go for it and then we're going to disappear and dissipate. And we're going to go for it. And we're going to, I don't think that Florida Marlins kind of approach of all or nothing is as healthy as let's do what we can do to go for it in a meaningful way every year. But let's not leave ourselves naked where we're giving up seasons just because, to kind of reset our cap so that we can go for it again in 3 years. I don't think that's great for the fans. I really don't.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the thing here, though, and the reason why everybody's talking about the Super Bowls, they're right there, right? They get to the Super Bowl. They got a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter and they lose it. They're right there to go back to the Super Bowl against the Rams, and they blow that 10-point lead in the fourth quarter down there. And then last year, you just have the disaster on the first offensive possession and some of those, not challenging the deep throw and those types of things. And so everybody's just wanting to get over that hump of being so close. I tend to agree with it. And I think Kyle Shanahan kind of feels that too. He wants to get over it. He's tired of being the guy that's right there so close. They want to keep building this thing to be, sustainable, which is what they're going to do. They just need to get it past that one, past one more step and really take it across the goal line here.
Breaking 80 said there's always something to nitpick with any coach. No one is perfect. His running back picks in the 3rd round, for example. But I remember the days of Dennis Erickson and Chip Kelly and Mike Singletary and Mike Nolan and Jim Tomsula. We are lucky to have Shanahan. The other thing I need to push back on is, when you lose, people then go back and second guess what the key elements of why you lost. The Niners lost to the Eagles. I'm going to say it real loud for the people in the back. The Niners lost to the Eagles because they ran out of quarterbacks and the game was over after the second series. They did not lose to the Eagles because of Tyler Kroft and some terrible formation that had Tyler Kroft blocking Hassan Reddick. That's ball, man. That's the way it works. It's personnel. What did they do in the offseason? They brought in 2 blocking tight ends that are probably going to make sure that they're upgraded at that spot. And that's really all you can do. But there's a bunch of different, people looked at that, and it's because the key play, the key injury to Purdy happened on that block. It's like, now that's negligence of Shanahan to have him out there. It's not negligence at all. That's football. And you sometimes have guys, you're not going to win every individual matchup, and especially in a blocking scheme. You're just not. And if you think you are, you're wrong. And there, a lot of times you get away with it. In this particular case, they didn't. So that's one. The other one is they didn't lose that NFC Championship game because Kyle did not challenge on that play. And I understand why he didn't, because it was early in the game. And at least if the booth were privy to the exact replays that we were privy to on our couch, we didn't actually get the definitive replay until after the next TV timeout. So I don't know what they're privy to, but if they're basically watching it on the tube, we didn't see any replay that showed definitively that ball was not caught by Devontae Smith until after the play was decided and the touchdown had been scored. So I don't know what they had available to them, but I really don't blame him on that situation either. You know, it's like you're a couple plays into the game, you're going to use your challenge in the biggest game of the year. All I would say is you got to be ready to use it at any point, but I don't blame him for that. If we had been shown a replay on TV that showed us that it was a definitive non-catch and then he didn't challenge it, then there's negligence. But I don't know what they saw, and if they saw what I saw, I wouldn't have challenged it either based on that. So so those were the two real complaints coming out of that game, and they all were pointed at Shanahan, and I think it's kind of grossly unfair, to be honest.
Well, and then here's where I disagree with you, because this is the one thing I really like a lot of what Kyle Shanahan does. One of the things that I've struggled with him at times is the way that he manages games, especially in big moments. And I felt like I feel like what he did at the beginning of that game, going to the long developing play action throw, and then on top of that having Tyler Kroft, who wasn't even active the week before, blocking Hassan Reddick one-on-one. I felt like that was a bad move. And then you take it one step farther and you look at what the Chiefs did the following 2 weeks later in the Super Bowl, and they're doing long developing plays just like the 49ers, but they're double teaming him. They're using the tight end to hit him, and then the tackle on the right side is free to come off of him, and he's the secondary guy. So they were kind of double teaming him that way throughout. So I don't like the way that he did that situation. You know, I feel like the reason that they were injured, the game was over 6 plays in, was because the quarterback got hurt. I feel like the scheme at that point was a bad scheme for the opponent. It's if that works throughout the regular season, that's awesome. But you're going up against a completely different animal when you're going up against an Eagles defense that had over 70 sacks on the season. So you've got to change things up a little bit. And everybody going into that game was like, they're going to have to take their time. They're going to have to be patient, yada, yada, yada. Third pass play in, it's deep drop back, and, he gets blasted. And some of that's on Purdy, some of that's on Kroft, some of it's on, it's not just one guy. I didn't agree with the scheme that they were using at that point. So
I will agree on one point in that it was pretty obvious to me that the Eagles were not respecting the play action fakes. And the play action pass is a major staple of the Shanahan offense. And I think that in their film study of their opponent, they probably should have recognized that the play action they're not reacting to the play action at all, and at least let the quarter, and maybe they did. Maybe they let the quarterback know, and it was a Purdy mistake. But at least, in some ways, if you're going to run play action against a team they're not respecting the play action fakes. I think I would have had more of a run heavy scheme and done less play action pass in a little bit more, just run it at them. Because I think if there was a weakness to the Eagles is they shot up the field so aggressively that I felt like they left themselves a little naked against the run. And I think the numbers reflected it. And you're right, 70 sacks. We're talking about a sack total that was greater than the 85 Bears. That's a number that should have screamed out, maybe don't go play action early in this thing, because they're not slowing down looking for the fake. I mean, they're just you're basically just wasting a second on that fake and giving them more chance to sack the quarterback. So I do kind of agree with you on that. to me, it came across as like Monday morning quarterbacking. There are examples. Tyler Kroft, if you go back and study Tyler Kroft's career, he was signed because he's thought to be more of a blocker. He's not a receiver. He's a blocker. He was more of a blocker at Wisconsin than he was a receiver. So, it's like, I understand. He didn't get the job done, and he didn't whiff on the block. He held it and let him get around. I would have liked to have seen maybe a little bit more urgency from Kroft there, but I think it's fair. I think it's fair criticism on Kyle to say that play action pass against the Eagles, especially this year when you get them again, may not be the way to go because it kind of works against you in some ways. Yeah. Let's jump to topic 2 here. Because we've gone for 25 minutes on this first topic, which we'll speed it up here, but there's a few topics I want to get to. Let's get into the 49ers and Trey Lance and what has changed. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, this has been something that everybody keeps asking. And, one of the things that I hear is, they brought back Jimmy Garoppolo last year. Maybe the 49ers weren't as high on Trey Lance going into week 1 of last season as everybody felt like they were. I know that during the offseason, Kyle Shanahan had said that they felt good going with Trey Lance. That's why they were trying to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. But then you got to remember, Jimmy Garoppolo was brought back at the end of training camp. How did that training camp go for Trey Lance? Now, again, this is just my speculation on maybe if it is more than just, the fact that Brock Purdy took over. I think some of it could be that maybe it's because Trey Lance struggled throughout training camp last year. The numbers show it. It was up and down. Kyle Shanahan talked about it. Maybe they just weren't really excited about where he was in terms of his development. And they knew that they were going to have some hiccups along the way. But maybe that's part of the reason why they brought back Jimmy Garoppolo, was because Trey Lance had struggled during training camp last year. He was okay during the preseason games. It was still a little rocky. The offense really struggled to move the ball at times, even in camp. And maybe that's part of where this whole thing kind of stems from. That he's never come out and proven that he can be as good as Jimmy Garoppolo. Just start as a starting point. He's never proven that he's better than what they had before. And so maybe that's where this whole thing changed. Instead of it just being about Brock Purdy coming in and blowing it up when he did, it's just a matter of Trey Lance struggling early on, and he hasn't really been able to be the guy that they thought they were going to get when they took him at number 3.
I mean, it's to me, it's he doesn't have the live reps, he doesn't have the live bullets, he doesn't have the experience, and this is pro football, and you're judged by wins and losses. And I think Shanahan and Lynch, despite the fact they've gone to 3 NFC championship games and a Super Bowl in the last 4 years, the standards in San Francisco are not that. The standards here are to win a Super Bowl. And I think they're probably feeling a little bit of pressure. And I think they're also looking at their window as a football team, and they're saying, this isn't going to be together. We're not going to have this group together forever. And it's created a level of urgency. And so they're just like, you know what? This isn't about developing any one player. This is about winning football games. And so we're going to put our guy out there that can win football games. People asked, what's the difference between last year and this year and what's changed? Brock Purdy.
Yes.
Last year, they didn't know that Brock Purdy was Brock Purdy. This year, they know what they have in Brock Purdy. If they didn't have Brock Purdy, they would be going with Trey Lance or at least having a competition between Lance and the best guy they could find to compete with Lance. But they're not just going to hand the keys to a young guy and say, you know what, make your mistakes, be inconsistent. The other thing is, where do you see inconsistency? You see it in the lack of points. And let's go through Trey's short, brief career. You're talking about no points, I think, in the first half in the Arizona game. Hardly any points at all, I believe, in the first half of the Texans game. He had a good second half against the Texans. No points, I believe, in the first half of the Bears game. 3 points? Now, there was a turnover that wasn't his fault, but ultimately it comes down to points. And they haven't scored a lot of points. And if you under Trey Lance, and if you ask me what's the main difference, the Niners scored 33 points a game under Brock Purdy with him as at the helm. And so they're going with Brock Purdy. And I think they're also prioritizing today over any individual's development. And you know what? You lose the locker room if you do it the other way. And that's really it. I mean, if there was no payment, then, this isn't the NBA. And when I say that, I mean, in the NBA, 16 teams make the playoffs, and you can kind of you can fool around for a month, 2 months. It doesn't matter if you start 0-5, 0-8, whatever. It doesn't matter, because you got plenty of time to recoup and recover. In the NFL, especially now with the importance put on the 1 seed, only one team gets that bye. The bye is crucial. And that NFC Championship game, if you can get it at home, it's huge. It means everything. We saw it last year in Philadelphia. That game probably goes a different way if it's in San Francisco. It means a ton. So there is no, hey, you know what? We'll just give away September. And, and that's why, the people that are pushing back so aggressively on the notion that they may go with, if Brock isn't ready in the first month, they may go with Sam Darnold. The Niners are going to go with who they think they can score the most points with. They don't care about draft position. They don't care about the investment. They don't care about what you think or I think or anybody else thinks. They're going to go with who they think can win those games. And if their professional opinion is that it's Darnold and they can score more points with Darnold, they're going with Darnold. And everybody's feelings be damned. And I think if you ever start to prioritize the development of one individual over the team goals, guess what? You lose the team. And they're not going to do that. And we weren't in the locker room, even though we're there on a regular basis. We weren't in the locker room in the immediate aftermath of the Bears game. I don't know exactly what some of the veteran players may have said. So to me, it's just I get the feeling that the players really like Trey as a person. They respect him as a hardworking guy, and a guy who's wired the right way and doesn't wants to do nothing but get better. But they're not giving away the season to see him develop. They're just not. And if the Niners attempted to do that, there'd be an uprising by the players.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've pushed back on quite a bit this year is that, they keep saying, if Brock's not 100%, then just go ahead and, even if he is, just roll with Trey. We got to see what you have in Lance before you move on from him. Let him play for a few weeks. Let him, and that's fine. You can do that. But if you start off 1-3 or 2-2, whatever, if you're not winning games that you should win, look at what's happened the last 2 years. The reason why the 49ers, one of the reasons that I feel the 49ers weren't in the Super Bowl in 2021, in 2022, is because they played those NFC Championship games on the road. And why did they play on the road? Well, they played on the road because they lost games to the Bears. They lost a bad game to the Broncos last year. Bad losses in the beginning of the season. The year before, they started off 3-5. And so you dig yourself a hole. It's great that you can dig yourself out, but there's a reason why you're playing on the road in that NFC Championship game. The 1 year they made the Super Bowl, they started off 8-0, and I keep pointing to that, and people are like, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. You don't have the time in the NFL to just throw a game out there and just say, hey, we're just going to see what happens. And, if this guy plays great, then that's awesome. But if he's really struggling, then that's okay. We don't care. It's not baseball. You only have 17 of these things, and every game really matters in the NFL. And like what I'm saying here I agree with you in terms of one of the big changes is the fact that that is the biggest change, right? Is that Brock Purdy came out and he played as well as he did. I'm just trying to get to that point where you've got some folks that are also pointing out that Purdy was the third string quarterback to start the season behind Garoppolo and Lance. And they're asking the question as to why. And I think that part of the reason there as to why is he's a rookie and they're not going to start him in his rookie season. Go back to listen to what they said about Lance. And Garoppolo, even then, it's going to be really hard to beat him out, that kind of thing. Kyle Shanahan doesn't want to start his rookies if he doesn't have to. And there was no way that Brock Purdy was there last year to be a starter. There was no way that he was even in a competition to become the starter. But he performed well enough. They recognized that he performed good enough that they were fine moving off of Nate Sudfeld for him. And, I don't know. I just look at it and I'm just kind of saying, there's got to be something else that's going on here with this Trey Lance situation other than just Brock Purdy. And the only thing that I can come back to is the struggles that he's shown when he's on the field, whether it's the performance, the points that you want to point to, or the way that he was in practice. Because that's the other thing too, right? Everybody, his performance last year in practice, everybody says, well, he's playing against the best defense in the league. Well, that defense wasn't that bad in 2021 either. They were pretty damn good. And Jimmy Garoppolo was nowhere near under 60% in training camp in that 2021 season. So, I get pushed back a lot from people on that. And this isn't about being a Lance hater. This is what happened. These are the numbers that he put up. This is the performance that he put up, and it was up and down. Kyle Shanahan even said that it was up and down, in training camp. So I think that maybe there's something to that, and maybe we're missing a little bit, because Larry, you've said this yourself. You pointed out really kind of when they turned me onto this. When the 49ers talk about Trey Lance and they talk about what they like about Trey Lance, they never talk about football. They only talk about the person. They don't talk about his ability. And that's an interesting take.
Yeah, and it's across the board. Greasy, Shanahan, Lynch. It's always about Trey the person. And as a person, he's an unassailable person, because he's a great kid who's hardworking. So and he's dedicated, and he wants to get better, and he's all about football. So there's nothing but great things to say about him. I share the screen because I want to play this cut. This is Kyle Juszczyk with Rich Eisen the other day, and listen to what he says. He's talking a little bit about, why Brock Purdy is the guy. Listen to exactly what he says here.
Why did Brock Purdy work so well last year from your perspective? Walk me through how a guy drafted in the manner in which he was drafted, and we understand the circumstances that got him out there on the field. Why did that work? Why does he work well like that?
When I describe Brock to people, and I truly, like, this is the biggest compliment that I could ever receive, is like, I say he's a football player. Like, the guy has just played a lot of ball. He started, since he was a freshman at Iowa State. So he played a lot of games, and you have, when you're playing that position, especially a quarterback, you just need those reps. You need those live reps, those live bullets, and just certain little things, timing things, natural reactions. They just get ingrained in your head, and you're just not thinking as much out there. You're just reacting. And I felt like that's what he was doing, is he was just going out there and he was reacting. He didn't have to think about it as much. And it sounds so much easier than what it really is. Like, to have the confidence to do that as, the last pick of the draft, rookie, you're the first year in this offense, to have the trust in Kyle to, all right, this is what Kyle told me to do during the week when we did the install. All right, I'm just going to go do that, and I'm going to react. I'm not going to overthink it. And I felt like that's what he really did. He was so well prepared that he didn't have to overthink things. And he really just ran the offense. He didn't try to do too much. He trusted in the playmakers that he had. He's got a plethora of weapons in our offense, and he didn't try to take on too much. He just went out there and he reacted. And I don't know, it sounds so simple, but it's so much harder to do than just say it.
There you go. Interesting comment there from Juice with Rich Eisen, but I think he crystallizes, a lot of what makes Purdy special is that, not only is Purdy dramatically better than Trey Lance, and that's like a given, but he's dramatically better than Jimmy Garoppolo in Jimmy Garoppolo's best year with the 49ers. Dramatically better. I mean, especially off the play action. When Garoppolo, if you go if you got the all 22 available to you, go check out Jimmy Garoppolo off any play action pass and look at how it takes him a second to recalibrate the coverage, the receivers, where everybody is, and then he makes a move. Then go watch Brock Purdy off play action. When he flips his head around and looks back at the coverage, he's already throwing the ball. He knows in his head what picture he's going to see when he turns back around. Garoppolo had to recalibrate the entire thing and see where is everybody again. That's innate, man. That's natural. I did an interview with Purdy early last year in camp, and I'm like, give me a night before the game routine for you. What are you going through? What's your process like? Do you watch a movie and hang out with the girlfriend and pet the dog and have something to eat? Or, are you deep in your playbook? What's your process, if you could share it with me? And he's like, Larry, I like to go through my our game plan, the formations, make sure I have it all down. I just go through it over and over again. 5, 6, 7 times until I feel like I really have it down. I mean, he's a very mature young player who's played a lot of football. And I just think that what Juszczyk said there, the key quote was, you need live reps. You need live bullets. Now, Trey Lance is not going to get better by not playing because he's not going to get those reps. But ultimately, that's what makes a quarterback a quarterback. If you say, well, who's the real villain in this whole thing with the Niners and Lance and his lack of development, it's the fact that the NFL doesn't have a minor league system. So if you draft a player that needs reps, there is no place for that player to get reps. And that's a big problem. And I think if there were a minor league system, Niners would send Trey to AAA or whatever they would call it. He would go down there, he would play, he would get reps, he would iron out bugs, and then boom, they could call him up and say, you know what? Now he's ready to go. He's had live reps. They're in a catch-22. It's like, I need experience to get a job. Well, I need a job to get experience. Trey needs to be the starter to get live reps, but he needs to be good enough and efficient enough in those live reps to be the starter. And that's the rub, Jack. That's it right there in a nutshell. We can talk about good versus evil and all, break this thing down and blame game and all this stuff, the investment and all that crap. At the end of the day, that's what it's about.
Yeah, John Lynch said it. John Lynch said as much during the scouting combine when he was talking to, I think it might have been with Matt Miyoko, or it might have been when he was just talking to the full group of reporters. If you go back and listen to either one of those two, there was a point where he said, we just need to get Trey Lance. Trey Lance just needs the reps, and we'll see if we can we got to see if we can find a way to make those happen. And that kind of showed you where, the 49ers feel the same way you do in terms of he needs the reps, but at the same time, they want to win games. And so that's why I think where he says we need to find out if we can get those for him or how we can get those. They're not going to throw away a game just to get him out there. They're going to play the best quarterback possible. And if they think it's Brock Purdy, it's going to be Brock Purdy. If they think it's, Trey Lance, it'll be Lance. Or if they think it's Darnold, it's Darnold. It's whatever. Sports is merit. We've talked about this. I've talked about it. Sports is meritocracy. The best player plays. And that's what we're seeing is happening right here.
Yeah, no question. All right, let's jump to the offensive line. I saw it again this morning, people blaming the Niner offensive line. Is the Niner offensive line a strength in your mind or a weakness? And I bring this up because the Niner O-line last year was second in the NFL in pressure rate allowed. Okay, and the Niner offensive line was also fifth, according to Pro Football Focus, in pass blocking efficiency rate for the 2022 season. So I know, we point to, well, McKivitz. Last year, everybody's favorite target, it seems like, was Mike McGlinchey. But to me, I think this offensive line, if you say, is it closer to a weakness or a strength? I think it's closer to a strength. Give me your thought.
I think the 49ers offensive line is one of the folks ripping on the 49ers offensive line over and over again. I think is one of the worst takes that I've seen, and this goes back to last year as well, going into the season. I didn't see it as a weakness then. I don't see it as a weakness now. Jake Brendel had his first year as an NFL starter last year, made the Pro Bowl. He, I saw on Twitter yesterday somebody put out where he had the 5th highest win rate among centers in the NFL, and he was in his first year starting. Is he going to get better or is he going to get worse? If he stays the same, the 49ers are in a pretty good position, but you would think that with time he's going to improve. Same thing with Spencer Burford. He was a rookie last year who started. I know he split time with Daniel Brunskill, but he's now been through a full NFL offseason. We saw what happened with Aaron Banks from his rookie year to year 2. There was a big improvement there, right? So can we say the same thing about Spencer Burford? I think so. I think it makes sense to say that he could have some improvement after starting 17 games as a rookie. So you've got 4 starters along that offensive line coming back from last year. And they were good. They were much better than most people talk about when it comes to the 49ers. Who watch them. And the right tackle spot, you go from McGlinchey to Colton McKivitz. There might be a little bit of a drop off there, but the improvements along the rest of the board, I think, kind of help raise that up a little bit, and could possibly even help McKivitz. I think it's just going to take a number of reps for him to get going. It's I saw some film stuff yesterday where somebody was talking about his play and they're blaming him for a couple of bad plays that happened, and I'm like, What are you talking about? That's a screenplay. There's no reason that the quarterback should even be over there with the ball. That ball should have been out. He did his job, the play breakdown and that kind of stuff. That's not on him. That kind of stuff. You look at what he's done so far. McKivitz, it was a rough game against the Rams in 2021 down in LA. It wasn't quite as bad last year when he played him up at Levi's, and we'll see. I'm not. I don't think the drop off from from McGlinchey to him is going to be huge. I'd rather have McGlinchey if I could, just because of that he's a good player, but the cost was too much, so that's what happened there. But this offensive line, I think, is much better than people talk about. Even the depth of the offensive line. You look at one of the who were the guys that the 49ers had talked about? They talked about, here's how I see it. You got Big John Feliciano. He can play center or guard. So if you have an issue at center, I think he's the guy that steps in at center. You have Nick Zakelj, who the 49ers have been talking up this whole offseason. This is a guy that can play guard or center. I would expect to see him kind of be in that role. And then your eighth guy, is that Jalen Moore or Matt Pryor? That's, I think, where you have a little bit of a concern. And you mentioned a good name last week. I think it was Tom Compton's out there.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe you bring Tom Compton in and fill that roster spot with him to add another veteran. We know that he's not the best, but as far as a backup tackle, Tom Compton was pretty damn good in 2021 for the 49ers.
Yeah, and I got another name I'm going to throw you that I think could be a viable option this summer that could be available if at the cutdown. But yeah, I look at this and I see, okay, Trent Williams, best left tackle in football, one of the highest rated players in the NFL. Aaron Banks, the left tackle, allowed only 1 sack and 2 quarterback hits all season. Jake Brendel was a Pro Bowl alternate and won the Bob McKittrick Award as one of the most respected linemen on the team. Spencer Burford was a revelation, I thought. I mean, Burford was incredible. He made 16 starts in his rookie season. He's got ideal measurables and frame to play right guard. And then you got McKivitz, and McKivitz, was given their gold helmet designation in the draft. They really like him. They like his disposition. I think he's a pass blocking upgrade from McGlinchey. He might be a run blocking downgrade, but Feliciano's a starter. He's on the bench. Zakelj, according to John Lynch, had the best offseason of any 49er. He's on the bench. Jalen Moore's there. They signed Joey Fisher. They gave him a significant bonus. Chris Forster, who's a great coach in his own right, says Fisher's a guard and really is excited about his potential. So I think the Niners' offensive line is more of a strength. And now people will say, well, they haven't invested enough in their offensive line. Really? Trent Williams was a first-round pick. Aaron Banks was a second-round pick. Burford was a fourth-round pick. And if you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, Jordan Mailata, their left tackle, was a seventh-rounder. Landon Dickerson, the left guard, was a second-rounder. Kelsey, who's a future Hall of Famer, was a sixth-round pick. Lane Johnson was the only first-round pick on their line. So they have one number 1 and one number 2. And the Niners have one number 1 and one number 2. So to me, that looks like kind of an identical investment. Now, the other thing people say, well, the Eagles don't have questions on their line. Really? They just lost their right guard, and they're going with Tyler Steen, a rookie out of Alabama, at right guard. So, I just think that if you look around the NFL and really took out the depth charts and went through it with a fine-tooth comb, what you'd find is even the best of the best, the creme de la creme of NFL teams, have one question at least along their offensive line. And I don't think the Niners are any different. All right, let's jump to the next one. 3 weeks from now, we've got camp beginning. The rookies report in about 2.5 weeks. And we're going to see the veterans report in roughly a little bit under 3 weeks at this point, 19 days, I believe, away. What is the over-under in your mind? This is a question I asked David Lombardi yesterday. What's the over-under on Brock Purdy preseason snaps played? Does he play at all? Does he not? Do they sit him the entire preseason? Does he play 5 snaps, 20 snaps? 5 series, 10 series? I mean, what do you think we're going to see from Purdy if you had to guess? It's all guesswork at this point because we really don't know his status, his physical condition, what he can handle, what he can't, where he's at exactly. All indications are, though, that he'll be ready for week 1, September 10th at Heinz Field against the Steelers. What's the over-under on Purdy preseason snaps and the jackhammer casino.
I'm going to go with instead of basing it off of snaps, I'm going to go with series. I think that's a little bit easier way of doing it because they could,
Sure.
if in a series, it could depend on how it goes. I'm going to say 6 series. I think he might get 1 to start. I think it's 1. I think here's the thing is when does he come back? I did a little show with somebody from NFL 32 beat writers here that does the Twitter stuff. And I was doing a podcast with him today. And he said, according to somebody that he's spoken with, they feel like Brock Purdy is going to be back around the 28th of July. If that's the case, then he's going to be there throughout all of training camp. And if Brock Purdy's there for all of training camp, I would say he's going to get 6 series. I'd say one in week 1, 2 in week 2, and then maybe take it into the second quarter in week 3 just to get them reps and get them enough time to kind of reacclimate and get those live bullets against another team. So that's my number. I would say he's going to get 6. So let's say as an over under, let's say 5, because then you could either, go a little bit below where I am or agree with me.
Yeah, I would go slightly under. I think he'll get 1 series in the first game. I think he'll get 2 in the second game, and maybe 1 in the third game. I think they'll be, it also has to do with how well he does, right? If he does really well, they're going to pull him out. And they're not going to want to risk injury or anything like that. So I think he's going to hit the ground running. I expect him to be quite a bit better than he was a year ago. I'll say slightly under. I'll go 4 series for Purdy in the preseason. Bleacher Report had an interesting article, and they had 3 top trade candidates for every team in the NFL. And I don't know if you saw the article, but the Niners 3 trade candidates, and I think there definitely are at least 3 trade candidates for the 49ers. I just wholeheartedly disagree with the guys they chose. They have Trey Lance, Sam Darnold, and JP Mason. Lance, I think, could make sense if they decide they're giving up, or because the only way to get out from underneath the money is to trade him. So you're not going to release him. And there could be a need at quarterback. And in my opinion, if he plays well, I think he's more likely to be traded than if he doesn't play well. And I expect him to play well. I think he'll be improved. I think he'll play well. And I think there'll be some trade offers for him. So Lance, I could see. But I don't think they're moving off of Darnold. And I really don't think they're going to trade JP Mason. If it were up to me and they said, give me your 3 names that you could see being traded, I will throw different names. I would throw names that are smaller and maybe don't bring as much, but Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, I think, could be traded. I think Ambry Thomas could be traded. And I'm going to put Zane Gonzalez out there as a guy that can be traded. Zane Gonzalez is not the worst kicker in the league, and yet Jake Moody most likely is going to win that job. And I think the Niners did a really smart thing by getting Gonzalez, and I think they're going to be able to get a day 3 pick for Gonzalez before week 1. So those would be my 3. What do you think? If I say, give me 3 names of candidates that you think potentially get traded away from the Niners roster this summer, who are your 3?
Yeah, that's a really good list you put out there, Larry, because I would go that direction too. You just look at so many linebackers. They have maybe Curtis Robinson instead of Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, but I would say it would be one of those linebackers. We've seen them do that in the past. So that's definitely one. Ambry Thomas makes a ton of sense, especially if he doesn't show any improvement this offseason for him. So that's a tough one. So beyond that, let's see. If you're looking at trading a running back, I just don't see JP Mason as being somebody they want to get rid of. That guy, he performed at a high level, did really well. If you're looking at trading a running back, it might even be Elijah Mitchell or TDP, Ty Davis Price, before you do JP Mason. Mason has a low cap hit for 2 more years. He's come on. He keeps showing improvement. So if you're going to move a running back, I just don't see it being Mason at all. So I would say one of those other running backs, maybe like I said, Davis Price, would make sense, kind of like what they did last year with, when they had to move on from Trey Sermon. It would be Ty Davis Price this year. And then so far as the third guy, the Zane Gonzalez one is an interesting decision there. I agree with you. I don't think we see Darnold moved at all. I just don't see why anybody would trade for Sam Darnold when everybody had a chance to go sign him like that, this offseason. I don't see why that's all of a sudden going to come. One other one, and this would be a surprise, I think, but we'll throw it out there, would be Javon Kinlaw. And the only reason there is he's in the last year of his contract. He's a little expensive, but if a guy like Spencer Wagee or some of these younger guys like Kalia Davis, if those 2 are performing at a high level, then you kind of start to get a little bit of a logjam there in the interior of your defensive line. Javon Kinlaw could be a nice backup behind Hargrave. But here's the thing to think about, right? We talk a lot about the rotation along that defensive line. And I'll say this is that that you're going to get about 60 to 70% of your snaps out of Nick Bosa on a year in, year out basis if he's healthy. And along the rest of the line, they haven't really had that last couple of years. But that's what Javon Hargrave gives them. He's played 60 to 70% of the snaps every year of his career. He's a heavy snap guy. So they may not have to rotate quite as much as they have in past years. And then Eric Armstead is kind of along that path as well when he's healthy. So maybe they can go in that direction with a guy like Kinlaw because they're not going to have that rotation be quite so deep in terms of the number of snaps that they're going to have to get out of that group.
Yeah, Terradome says, Krug and Hammer like baking soda. What's up, my man? There you go. Arm and Hammer. Rafael Sanchez says, how is Mason a trade candidate? Elijah Mitchell, sure, but not Lil Beast mode. Yeah, I mean, there's no way they're moving JP Mason. I mean, that would be negligence. Mike Monahan says, I've been saying Brock would be back by August 1st at the latest. I'll give you one other digital Drew in Chicago. Digital, happy Friday to you. He says Ty Davis Price is a great target to move or get cut. I agree. Ty Davis Price looked good in the mini camp, and he may get caught up in a numbers game. And then I'll throw one other that I know a lot of people don't agree with, and it would be like, oh man, but Juwan Jennings is a free agent at the end of the year. The Niners do not have the money to sign him. They drafted Ronnie Bell this year, and they signed Tay Martin last year. Both those guys are cheaper than Juwan Jennings. Jennings, though, has some respect around the league because he's more accomplished. And the Niners have a number of former Niner people in different spots around the league, people that would have insight. Like if I'm Tennessee and I'm trying to make things, if I'm Rand Carthon and I can get Juwan Jennings at the cut down for a 7th round pick, I might do that because you know what? He might really, first of all, he went to the University of Tennessee. He'll be a very popular addition. Second of all, Jennings could be a guy that helps them establish a culture there. And I think there's a chance that Ronnie Bell and Tay Martin outplay him in this camp. And to me, I look at the Niner receivers as 5 guys: Ayuk and Debo, Ray, and Danny Gray. And then I think it's 3 guys competing, maybe 4, between Juwan, Tay Martin, Ronnie Bell, and Chris Conley, Willie Snead. 5 or 6 guys competing for one possession receiver spot. And I think Ronnie Bell showed unbelievable ball skills at times in this offseason. Tay Martin is a phenomenal possession receiver with better hands than Jennings, in my mind. And he got stronger in the upper body. I expect Tay Martin and Ronnie Bell to really fire this summer. And I think the Niners could be looking at a just a numbers game where Jennings, nobody's going to give you a pick for Tay Martin. Nobody's going to give you a pick for Ronnie Bell. But they probably would be able to get a pick for Juwan Jennings. And since he's a free agent at the end of the year, I could see it. I know there's a lot of pushback because he's made some big, big catches in Niner history, especially in the postseason. And people are like, no, hell no, they're not going to move off of Juwan. He's too valuable. But you can't pay everybody, and they won't be able to pay him. They know it. They're preparing for life without him. And I also think that there's a chance that Tay Martin and Ronnie Bell show just enough in the preseason that they won't clear waivers en route to the practice squad. And then it's just a matter of, you can have Juwan Jennings, but you're going to lose these other guys probably to waivers. So how about trade Juwan Jennings and make Tay Martin active or Ronnie Bell active? I think that's going to be a really tough call at the end of camp, but I could see it coming down that way.
Yeah, it would be a tough one, and that would be a little bit of surprise. And like Charlie Higgs says over in the comment section, Jennings is awesome, but I think he's replaceable. That is a tough one because he is really good. He's a really good route runner, and that's where why Kyle Shanahan talks about his ability to get separation is he's just a really good route runner. He's much better than what the Friars had before in that spot. And so it would be a surprise if they moved off of him. But if they can get a 6th or 7th, and a guy like you said, like Tay Martin is performing at a very high level during training camp in the preseason, I could see them possibly making a move like that.
All right, we're 1 hour in. We're having a good time on this Friday morning. Jack Hammer in the house, and let's talk a little bit about John Lynch. There is on NFL Rumors, there's a list of the longest tenured GMs in the sport, and it made me laugh because I'm like, man, who's the best GM? Who's the longest tenured GM? Who's been around the longest? It's Jerry Jones, the Cowboys owner, and then Mike Brown, who's basically the Bengals owner. And then there's Bill Belichick, who might as well be the Patriots owner, even though it's Kraft's team. And then it's Mickey Loomis, who's like an executive for like the Saints and the Pelicans, in New Orleans. He's been there forever. The first real GM on the list is John Schneider, who's been with the Seahawks since January of 2010. He's listed as the fifth longest tenured GM. And then John Lynch is actually, believe it or not, I would figure John Lynch is a relatively new GM and he'd be towards the bottom of the list as far as tenure. But no, John Lynch is 11th. Only 10 guys have been in their job longer than John Lynch. He was hired January 29th of 2017. He signed an extension in 2020. Give me your evaluation of John Lynch, because, I really, when I was really excited about this regime when the Niners hired Shanahan, because I saw Shanahan as a clear upgrade from what they had before. But I really didn't love the Lynch hire at the time, just to be full disclosure, because he was coming out of the booth. He was a Hall of Fame safety, or a Hall of Fame to be safety at that point. And I just thought, you know what? There's no scout. There's no college scouting director, pro scouting director that had a better track record for this position. But John has come in, and I think he has done this job to near perfection. He embraces the collaborative approach. He's empowered Adam Peters. He doesn't know everything. He doesn't try to know everything. He's a great face of the franchise and has given this team tremendous stability as far as the public face of the team, especially when Shanahan gets in certain modes where it's like he's very emotional. I think John's more of a rock. But ultimately, you're only a good GM, in my opinion, if you can find players. And I just think that Peters and Lynch together and the Niner scouts deserve a tremendous amount of credit for what they've been able to do on day 3 of the draft and after the draft. They have provided a level of depth. I mean, the 49er roster not only has some of the best individual talents in the sport, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, Trent Williams, Hargrave, Bosa, Greenlaw, Warner, Charvarius. I mean, they've got some of the best individual players in the sport, but they also have this unbelievable, nearly unmatched depth because of their kicking butt on day 3 and after the draft. And to me, I would give Lynch an absolute A. And I know people would say, oh, now you're sucking up to Lynch. I believe it. I believe everything I'm saying. And I really believe Lynch is one of the best at it right now. I really do. And I'm shocked that I'm saying that, because I really am a believer that you kind of work your way up through from scout to regional director to college director and he skipped all those levels, right? And went right to the top job. I didn't love it at the time, but man, the results, it's hard to argue with the results, man.
Yeah, you look at it, and I think you hit the nail on the head there when you're talking about, John Lynch is a guy who's been around the game forever. He's a Hall of Famer, right? And on the defensive side, but sometimes you get those guys into a role where he was in the booth, comes out of the booth, and sometimes they just struggle with it. And I think part of the reason he hasn't necessarily struggled with it as much as others is because he, as you said, is smart enough to know what he doesn't know. He's also smart enough to and secure enough in himself to be able to allow other people to have a voice and make decisions. And I think that's a really underrated aspect of being a leader, is allowing your people that you work with that are below you in the organizational chain to be able to step up and make decisions, or work with them to come up with those decisions. And that's where you get like Adam Peters in the scouting department, like you're saying. So from that aspect, I think he's done a really good job. I agree with you also that he's, as the face of the franchise, he is perfect in that role for the 49ers, somebody that they really haven't had in quite a while to be able to step out in front of the mic and really take on those things. And, pretty much everything you said was correct. It's kind of hard to disagree with you. I was a big fan of John Lynch when going back to his days as a player at Stanford, right? I remember John Lynch, quarterback. I was a Stanford fan. I had season tickets as a kid in high school going to the Stanford game. So I remember him making the transition from quarterback to defensive back at Stanford, let alone, what he did in the NFL and where he is now. So, maybe I'm a little bit biased on my like of John Lynch, but I do feel like he's done a pretty good job. Somebody over here in the comment section did a nice job of mentioning the drafting of Trey Lance. And that's something that could stick, as far as a negative mark, a big negative mark in his career. And that's, I think that there is some accuracy to that. I also think that it gets maybe taken away a little bit if Brock Purdy comes out and takes them to Super Bowls or wins Super Bowls, then, the Lance mistake doesn't quite sting as much as it would have if it just, if the franchise was just falling apart as a result of the Lance deal, then yeah, I think he would be getting a lot more pressure than what he's getting so far. Put it that way.
In full disclosure, I have a hard time separating sometimes real life from football. But when my dad passed, my dad meant everything to me, and he was like my rock, and he was just everything that I am as a person. I feel like was inspired by my father, and it hit me really, really hard. John Lynch took the time to call me and give his sentiments and offer his condolences and just be a human being, and I'm not personal friends with John. We don't go out and drink beers, he didn't know my father. But that kind of thing, Jack, I don't know. To me, that tells me a lot about a person when somebody takes the time to issue such a nice gesture. And so I can't separate that John Lynch from the John Lynch who's the general manager. And I wish I could, but I just can't. And I will say this as well, that I really think that the 49ers have mastered free agency. They do it better than everybody else. And what I mean by it is that they allow multiple players to walk away, and they understand the dynamic of the locker room. And the dynamic of the locker room is this: you can't go sign a bunch of free agents and pay them, because in free agency, what do you got to do? You got to overpay to get guys, right? Because you got to attract them over other teams' offers. So by definition, if you're signing a guy in free agency, you're going to overpay. But they don't overpay a bunch of guys and then have the guys in the room going, man, why is that guy getting so much money? Why is this guy getting so much money? I'm better than that guy. And that's how teams fall apart, is when there's too many players that are basically very similar, but this guy was signed from outside and this guy was drafted from within. And all of a sudden it becomes this, man, they don't respect the guys, their own guys. They respect the guys from outside more. So what have the Niners done? They've bypassed all that. They've largely built in the draft. And when they dabble in free agency now, it's Charvarius Ward. You can add Mooney Ward to the secondary and pay him the most. Why? Because he's better than those guys. And they know it, and there's nothing they can say. You can add Javon Hargrave and add him to the D-line and pay him the most of any defensive tackle because he's better than those guys, and they know it. So there's no roster discord. And then what happens when you allow 4 free agents to walk and sign one? You get 3 or 4 compensatory draft picks in the following year's draft, and that then enables you to build more from within. And to me, the Niners there's subtle differences, but as far as roster building and 53-man roster construction, their approach is the best. Go get a premier free agent, make your team significantly better, and not one guy in the room can be like, hey, man, I should be paid more than Javon. Nope. Hey, man, I should be paid more than Mooney. Nope. So I think that's genius when you really – and John knows it from having lived it, right? He's been in the room. He's been the free agent. He's been, so he understands the dynamics and of the locker room. And too many teams are like, I need this guy and that guy and this guy and that guy, and they play rotisserie ball, and they wind up pissing off their existing veterans, and guys are leaving because they're angry, and there's all kinds of discontent, and then you're not getting these compensatory picks. The Niners get premier free agents, locker room chemistry, and compensatory picks.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and
really incredible.
That's Lynch, and I think it also the fact that I know we're talking about Lynch here, but going back to Kyle Shanahan a little bit, I think his history, having his dad having been a head coach in the NFL and having spent his life basically in the NFL, I think he understands that too, and I think that's why he works so well with the players. I think the players, that going back to that discussion of on Shanahan, I think the players really respect him because he's just so upfront with them, and he's not afraid to, like the Jimmy Ward thing, right? Tayshaun Gibson, hey, if you want to play, you're going to play slot. If you don't want to play slot, then you can sit on the bench. It's up to you. Just being real with guys like that. I think they appreciate that at the end of the day. Really quick, there's a comment over here from Edgardo Rosario, and he says, many mistakes no bigger than Solomon Thomas over Patrick Mahomes. It's a little bit further up.
Let's see.
And this is in regards to some of the missteps that they've had under the regime, John Lynch, and so on. And one reason I wanted to hit on this, I mentioned it on my channel. I did a video about Kyle Shanahan's ability to develop quarterbacks, and Patrick Mahomes is always one of those guys that's brought up. But I think you need to understand where the 49ers were in 2017, and you need to understand the 49ers philosophy. The 49ers believe that you build up front. You build through your defensive line first, and you build through your offensive line second. And they have stayed true to that throughout. Now, Patrick Mahomes, if you had drafted Patrick Mahomes in 2017, there's no guarantee that Patrick Mahomes today is the Patrick Mahomes we know. Because you got to remember, Patrick Mahomes was drafted to a Kansas City Chiefs team that was already a playoff team. He went to a really good team to begin with. It's not like the Chiefs were like a flop and all of a sudden they add Patrick Mahomes and now they're a playoff team. He just, they were already good. It's just that he was better than Alex Smith, obviously. And so that's why they took off. But the 49ers weren't in that spot. And so, again, they stay true to who they are in terms of their core beliefs. They've worked their way through this. And I think that's another part of the whole puzzle when you look at the 49ers is that there's a reason why their offensive and defensive lines make up almost 50% of their salary cap. It's because that's where they believe games are ultimately really not necessarily won or lost, but those guys are really key because your defensive line sets everything else for that defensive group. That offensive line helps give your quarterback and your running game enough time to work. And I think that's why things like this, I push back on them so often.
Well, I think it's a good point. Also, I'll say this. I mean, I think it was an acknowledgement of the facts, which are that rookie quarterbacks, first-round rookie quarterbacks are hard. It's a hard thing to handicap. It really is. And so the 49ers were sitting there going, okay, we're not ready to win right now. We know we need to build up on defense. And they wanted to use Kyle Shanahan's expertise to find offensive players. And they knew they had Kirk Cousins staring them in the face if they wanted him down the road, and that Kyle had a great relationship with Cousins. And so, they hit the ground. They didn't, they got hired in January, right? So the draft was a few months later. That means that you're coming in mid-process, and they probably, they didn't feel comfortable making a highly difficult draft choice off of a shortened, quickened process. And they knew the failure rate of first-round quarterbacks. Now, it's a double loss because they passed on Mahomes and Watson, and then they took a defensive player, and that defensive player wound up being a bust. And John's got to wear that, right? There's no question about it. But to me, I understood the ideology, or at least the thinking on their part, which is, this is the quarterback position is all kinds of problems as far as evaluating it. We think we got a sure thing coming maybe in a year in Cousins. Let's build up our defense. They just took the wrong defensive player. And obviously in hindsight, Mahomes would have been a phenomenal draft pick. But they didn't have the foresight, and that was the decision they made. I'm not excusing it because that was a bad draft throughout. Reuben Foster, bust. Ahkello Witherspoon, bust. Kittle was taken in the 5th round, and I think DJ Jones might have been a 6th rounder in that draft, but the rest of that draft was very disappointing throughout. So that, in a lot of ways, was the learning curve for John Lynch as a general manager right then and there. And it's a whiff, but I did understand their ideology. Digital Drew says, I don't agree, Larry, not at all. His move to get Trey Lance will define his tenure here. That's all anyone will remember, and it's not trending well, at least right now. Well, if you're going to bang on Lynch for drafting Lance, you gotta credit Lynch for drafting Purdy, right? I mean, and also I would say to you this, okay, if you didn't want Lance, who did you want? Who would you have taken instead?
Mac Jones. Mac Jones was right there for him. Mac Jones would have been perfect for the 49ers in that spot. But
Jones, some people maybe, but in Mac Jones, not necessarily looking that great.
No, I say that because I had him as my top quarterback in the draft, so I'm throwing that out there. The ball did come out on time with accuracy, and he's a smart guy. But here's my question is, knowing how the locker room felt about Jimmy Garoppolo, was Mac Jones and his personality going to be able to walk into that room and immediately commandeer the room? My guess is no. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's the thing, is that Mac Jones and his personality. I think when you look at Brock Purdy, there's a lot of similarities between why he's been successful in this offense and why I felt like Mac Jones would have been successful. But here's the thing: they didn't take Mac Jones. They did what they did, and they got a guy who plays the game pretty much the same way, maybe a little bit quicker. But the biggest difference between what they have now in Brock Purdy and what they would have gotten Mac Jones is I think they got a way better dude. I think, and that's what Kyle Juszczyk was talking about. And you watch the way Brock Purdy is on the field. You hear the stories about the way he takes command. He's got a swagger to him. He guys throws a touchdown pass and I don't know if it was against the Dolphins or the game against the Bucks, whatever, one of those first 2 games, and he's pointing to his arm and he's excited. And that shows that this guy believes in himself, and then it kind of, rubs off on everybody else that you have around you, that kind of leadership, and his ability to follow through with what he's going to say. And they ended up getting the better player in the end. So I say Mac Jones, and I know people laugh at that one, and they should, because they ended up getting somebody better in the end.
Digital Drew says the Niners have whiffed quite a bit in the early round since Lynch has been here. It's not his strength for certain, but where Lynch's money is on player relations, very much like a Bob Myers. Dusty Gold says Larry drafted Purdy. Thank you. You would think. 2 gray beard hairs with the super chat. I can't stand these what ifs in football. Facts are we have one of the best teams in football. The staff has done amazing and found gems for our team. Quarterbacks don't grow on trees. We found Brock Purdy. I'll just say that. BCB. Let's go. There we go. All right, let's 2 gray beard hairs says, Larry, every team whiffs, all capitals. When you go all capitals, that means you really mean it. All right, let's go to a list that I thought was really interesting. And this is the time of year, and I'm kind of the nerd for this. I'll admit it. I'm a personnel guy at heart, right? So I'm always looking down the road. I'm looking, you catch up with me in January and February, I'm watching draft film. I'm deep in it. I'm the guy who watches every minute of the combine, and then tells everybody that you make more mistakes than ever by overvaluing guys in the combine, but then I'll watch every minute. I'm the guy who reads tiny little reports about guys' pro days and gets excited. I'm the guy who's already watched film on the 2 guys that are in the supplemental draft who the Niners probably won't even blink at. And one of the articles that caught my attention, and this is to me an interesting time of year. Now we've seen the draft, we've seen free agency, we're about a month away from camp, and now everybody's taking a look at everybody's roster. And you know the way it works. I mean, sometimes you feel a need twice, because free agency comes before the draft. You sign a guy in free agency, and then the draft falls a certain way, and you draft a guy at the same position that you signed somebody at in free agency. Now you got a surplus of players, and not every team has an even amount of players. You might look up and say, well, we thought we were going to get this guy in the draft, so we bypassed the need in free agency, and then nobody fell to us in the draft that we liked. So now we have a real need going into camp. So there are teams that have too many receivers, too many D linemen. The Niners, for example, I think have too many linebackers. And Demetrius Fowles or Oren Burks or Curtis Robinson may wind up being traded. Niners may have too many receivers. There's a bunch of different, and there's every team's like this. So they had a list the other day on Bleacher Report, guys who are, veterans that have done some things in the NFL that may actually be cut at the end of camp this year when there's the reshuffling and everybody pairs down to 53. And there were some really interesting names on this list. I'll read you the list and then we can go through it. Chase Claypool. I mean, this is just, and they had one for every team, and there was two different stories about this. So I just took the guys that were the most interesting to me. Mm-hmm. Chase Claypool in Chicago, KJ Hamler, wide receiver in Denver, Lael Collins, offensive tackle in Cincinnati. Jonah Williams moves from left tackle to right tackle. Lael Collins may get cut, the former Cowboy. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the running back in Kansas City. Corey Davis, the wide receiver with the Jets. They say Joe Mixon may get cut. The running back in Cincinnati, who's a Bay Area guy. Derek Barnett, the defensive end for the Philadelphia Eagles. Rashad Fenton, a corner for Arizona. Alton Robinson, a defensive end from Seattle. Neville Gallimore, the Cowboys defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. Amik Robertson from La Tech, who's a corner with the Raiders. And I can never pronounce this guy's names, but Atakundo Ogundeji, the edge rusher, the former Notre Dame edge rusher in Atlanta. And then the guy that they say the Niners may wind up cutting at the, of note is Ambry Thomas. And the fact is Ambry's 24. He still has a lot of talent, but he went from 2 years ago playing 5 games, a 5-game starter as a rookie, to last year only played 41 defensive snaps all season long. So a lot of people are estimating the Niners may wind up trading or cutting Ambry Thomas at the cutdown. But of that list, the guys that really interest me are, one, Chase Claypool. I've always been a Claypool fan. I know they're saying he's got a bad attitude, and I know he's been critical of Kyle Shanahan's, practice routine, so they'll probably steer clear. But he has not been good with the Bears. The Bears traded a second-round pick to get him. He only caught 14 balls for 140 yards and no touchdowns in 7 games with Chicago last year. But I think Claypool is outstanding talent. Lael Collins. I mean, if the Niners really are looking for, another tackle, and they could get somebody as good as Lael Collins to challenge McGlinchey for that right tackle spot, man, I'd have a lot of interest there. Derek Barnett, a lot of talk the Niners could use a veteran edge, and I think they could. He tore his ACL last year in week 1, didn't play all year. He only makes $3 million, so he's pretty reasonable. He's a damn good pass rusher. Ogundeji from Atlanta, to me, would be an interesting guy as a pass rusher. Alton Robinson would be interesting. And then I'm a huge fan of Neville Gallimore, the Cowboys interior guy. I'd rather have Gallimore than Kinlaw, to be honest. And if the Cowboys they just drafted Mozzie Smith out of Michigan. If they want to part ways with Neville Gallimore, I'd gladly move off of Kinlaw and sign Gallimore and use him in a rotation up front. What do you think of the list, Jack? Is there any name there that stands out to you? To me, defensive end, offensive tackle. You can always use another corner, that's for sure. What, maybe even safety if there was a right kind of player. John Johnson, I think, was on this list. Is there any of those names intrigue you at all?
Yeah, there's 2 of them. Lael Collins jumps out at you, especially because he can play tackle, and that's where the Niners need to add somebody. So I would say Lael Collins is definitely one. And then Derek Barnett is a guy that can play at a pretty high level. He's only going to be $3 million. It fits their salary cap structure. So I think those are 2 players that fit possible needs as this thing goes through during training camp. If one of those 2 players was to get cut, or if they were both to be released, I think one of those guys would be a terrific addition for the 49ers.
Yeah, I agree. To me, my favorites on the list would be Gallimore, because I think he could be an impactful defensive tackle. Lael Collins, and probably Claypool. And I realize Claypool is, the Niners have always seemed like they like Notre Dame guys. And I love this kid at Notre Dame. And I just think that he needs to be in a room where everybody's not kissing his ass and telling him he's the savior. And on this team with Ayuk and Debo, those guys are tone setting type players. This guy would be more in line with what he is, which is a big slot receiver. But man, you go to the red zone and you're thinking of, throwing the ball, you got 5 guys in the pattern and you could have Debo, Ayuk, Claypool, Kittle. That's a really nice thing. Heck, you could even use Claypool as a flexed out tight end in certain situations. Man, I'd be very intrigued by that. I think he could play far better football here than he did in Chicago or Pittsburgh. 2 graybeard here says, Larry, you're lazy, but we love you. BCL. I'm not sure. BCL, Jack?
I'm not sure what that one is.
Oh, I get you. Instead of BCB for Brock.
Oh,
BCL.
okay.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
I get you. My wife will weigh in on that. All right.
Yeah, I like the one earlier. There was one earlier that was even better, and it was I don't remember who said it, but it was you missed it, but it was too far up. He said, "These 2 old farts, no football," and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah. There we go. Dusty Gold says, always looking for those captain types like Ronnie Bell. Sports fan says, Claypool, no thanks. I'm good unless he's taking a minimum. I hear you. Anyway, Jack, what do you got cooking on the channel? That we're almost an hour and a half in. We'll cut it right here. What do you got cooking on your channel the rest of the weekend? What can we expect if we tune in?
Yeah, well, I'm wrapping up my quarterback, review. I did what the areas that Brock Purdy needs to improve on. So the next up is going to be what he does well. So I'll be putting that one out tomorrow. Might even be a little bit of film kind of work that gets put into that one as well. So check that one out. Always put new stuff up over there. That's the thing. It's a little bit of everything. If there's something here that people want to hear about, feel free to check out the channel. Send me a message on there, and I'll put together a video for you before training camp comes up. And right now, just wrapping up the article for the Press Democrat on Purdy's improvement as well. So that's
when does that come out? What paper will that be in?
Well, for the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, so 49ers.Press Democrat, the blog there, okay. And it'll be the things that Brock Purdy does well, the strengths that he brings. The video that I did yesterday was talking about the weaknesses, like I said, and I wrapped that up. And what I said in the wrap up is that if Brock Purdy fixes those 3 things, and he's the same guy that he was last year in terms of all the other stuff, and he improves a little bit, I think he really has the opportunity to be a guy that's going to be talked about for the MVP in the NFL this coming season or the next year, because he performed at such a high level last year. If that kind of play continues, it's going to be hard not to start looking at him that way.
A lot of good comments here. We could play comments all day, but Harold says, amazing show. I really enjoyed it as well. We have one that I'm going to finish with, a non-super chat, but Callie Young had this early in the show. He said, and we'll finish with this, other than the quarterbacks, what position are you guys most excited to see in training camp?
That's a good one, because there's, I look at this roster, and the 49ers roster is so good. I'm just looking forward to seeing everybody, really. If I need to narrow it down to just one spot, I'm looking forward to seeing I'm really looking forward to seeing how Isaiah Oliver plays in the slot. I think he's going to be an upgrade in there. I'm looking forward to seeing how this pass rush comes together. That's a big one as well. The same thing with that offensive line. That's one of the fun things that I enjoy about camp, is the one-on-ones between the offense and the defensive line. Those are always funny. I saw your show a little bit, Larry, and Dave was talking about how you don't really get a good view of the run of the offensive line and defensive line until you get the pads on. I disagree with that a little bit. I think the things are pretty good there. You can get a very good view of that even before the camp. But I'm looking forward to seeing how that whole group on both sides of the ball comes together, because there's just been so much negativity around the offensive line. I want to see how they perform. And even on the defensive line, I want to see what Drake Jackson can do.
Yeah, I mean, Drake is Drake. I'm eager to see Drake. A couple sleepers I'm eager to watch. Deshaun Jameson from Texas, the corner / return man. Spencer Wagee from North Dakota State. I love everything I've seen about Wagee, and I've talked to him. I really like him. I think he's going to be a guy to watch this summer. But if I had to go position groups, I'm going to say, one that you wouldn't think, and that's kicker. Jake Moody is just a monster. I mean, I can't even really describe it. He's just got one of the great power legs I've ever seen. I mean, this guy has got a leg. This guy's like Robbie Gold times 5 as far as what kind of leg strength he has. And I just want to see if he can, couple together some consistency with that incredible leg power. And that's, he could be a Niner for the next 15 years. I mean, he could be the longest tenured 49er, and we're seeing the beginning of a real long career. His leg strength is awesome. He connected from 63. It would have been good from 70. I mean, it was like an unbelievable boot. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Moody in the preseason. And if there's one position group, I'm going to say running back. I thought McCaffrey took it to a totally different level in this offseason. If there's one guy that stands out on this field above all else, it's Christian McCaffrey. And then Elijah Mitchell, if he's healthy, is a proven back. Jordan Mason, last year was 240. This year he looks lighter and faster, and he's still a powerful back. I think Jordan Mason could be really, really good. Ty Davis Price, to me, looked, I thought, better than at any point last year in the mini camp and the OTAs. And then I'm a big fan of both the undrafted rookie free agent running backs, Ronald Awatt from UTEP and Kalen Laburn from Marshall. Laburn carried over 300 times last year for the Thundering Herd, and he's got real powerful legs. And he's a guy who can catch the ball in the flat. He can make you miss. He's a little faster than you think. He's a little bit more powerful than you think. You can't arm tackle the guy. So Laburn's really intriguing. And then Awatt, who I did a whole hour with on the channel about a month ago, this guy can catch the ball. I mean, this guy can really catch the ball. And he's got that speed to bounce it outside. He can run those bubble screens. He can catch it. He can make you kind of think that he's going inside and then get to the edge. I think that running back spot is going to be so intriguing to watch once these games get going. And also, once we see live action. So running back and the kicker. Those are my 2 spots.
The kicker one's fantastic because I agree with you. When you get a chance, when you guys all get the chance to see Jake Moody kick the ball, you're going to be impressed. I mean, it's one thing to get out there and watch Robbie Gould kick field goals and so on. But when you're standing there and the music's kind of quiet, but you can hear everything that's going on, and you see him kick the ball, the force with which he's kicking it and the sound, there is definitely there's power there that the 49ers haven't had at that position. It's pretty impressive. So I'm looking forward to that. Love the running back one. It'll be fun. The linebacker group, we know that's a really deep room. Those one-on-ones, whether it's pass rush protection versus blitz drills or in coverage, that running back linebacker matchup, that's going to be a lot of fun to watch too.
Rick Diaz says, "Hello, Jack. This is Rick."
Hey, Rick.
And then Rick follows it up with, "I'm going to be a good boy this year." Is there a backstory to Rick's chats?
I do not know. Rick tends to say that to me often, so I just usually let him roll with it.
Jack, good to see you. Have a great Friday, man. I'm going to play a couple spots before we get out, but have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next Friday.
Absolutely. Make sure you guys get the pig in a pickle. Let's go now.
Pig in a pickle. See you, Jack.
Bye-bye.
There you go. The great Jack Hammer. Love doing these with Jack. Jack's fantastic. All right. Let's thank our sponsors, Marin Auto Glass, marinautoglass.com, 415-883-3030. We're also the title sponsor of the Krueger Show is Pig in a Pickle. And here's their location in Marin.
So New York Style Sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh, goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never going to deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
Hey, do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it. Guaranteed.
All right, coming down the home stretch on the Krug Show on this Friday. If you go to thekrugshow.com, you can order merchandise. And thanks to everybody who has. If you order merchandise, I'll do a customized video for each one of you. And I appreciate everybody for ordering the merchandise that you have. Appreciate you all. If you've ordered something in the last day or two, we will make sure we get that video out to you in the next day or so. We are at 19,737 subs and growing as we attempt to get to 20,000 subs before training camp. We got another couple weeks to get it done. We'll get there. 19,737 subs right now. So if you're in the chat, hit like, hit subscribe. If you hit like, that just helps the algorithm. More people find the show. If you hit subscribe, you'll just get an alert. Make sure you hit that notification bell as well. And if you do, you'll get an alert every single time we go live. Are we done for the day? Hell no, we're not done for the day. We got Giants going tonight. Giants, big homestand. Is Farhan going to make a deal? Giants Rockies go tonight in the post game. Ned Colletti's going to join me on the show, and we'll get Ned's thoughts on what the Giants may or may not do trade-wise between now and the deadline. Chi Sox are sellers. The Cardinals are sellers. There's a number of interesting teams around baseball that are out of the race and will sell and be selling for the first time. Farhan made it perfectly clear yesterday on KMBR that they're looking to buy, and they're looking for a second baseman who can hit. Tyro Estrada is obviously banged up. He's on the DL, and the Giants are looking for, a second baseman that can swing the bat. So who's that going to be? Who exactly is going to be that middle infielder that they can somehow acquire that can really swing the bat? There's a number of them out there, and it's going to be interesting to see. Maybe a Whit Merrifield. If Merrifield he plays a little infield, a little outfield. Giants are definitely slumping. But tonight, after the game, as soon as it's over, join me on the Krug Show, a little post game with the great Ned Coletti. Now, tomorrow morning, bright and early at 8 a.m., the coach is going to be in the house for Krug Coach 3. That's right. We've done 1. We've done 2. We're bringing Coach back for Krug Coach 3. That's coming up tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., bright and early. Set your alarm clocks. Get up early and watch me and the coach chop it up. I love the coach. He's doing a great job. And then Marcelino McCrary-Ball, Niners linebacker, just trying to coordinate a time, but Marcelino's going to be on the show. And really looking forward to that. Marcelino is a terrific young player. And I mentioned before about Deshaun Jameson, Spencer Wagee, but Marcelino's another guy that I think's taken it to another level. He is a tremendous player. He really is good. And I think he's got a Pro Bowl future, and I'm really excited about his future. This guy played corner at Indiana, then played nickel, really the size of a safety. But I saw him at a dinner about a month and a half ago. He's jacked up. He's put on some good weight in the upper body, and he's fired up for camp. So I said, hey, Marcelino, let's wrap a little bit before training camp starts. So he's coming on. So I'm really eager to do that. He's one of my favorite 49ers. And it's like I talked to him 3 or 4 times last year, and then he was like, hey, man, I'm on the practice squad. I'm not playing. I don't know if I want to talk too much. And I'm like, I get it. I totally get it. I go, but you know what? Your day's coming. And his day's arrived. And it's you guys are going to love what you see out of Marcelino this summer. Mo says, Larry, ask Marcelino when he started designing cleats for players throughout the league. And I'm sure he'd like that. Oh, yeah, I will. I didn't even know that. So, yeah, that will be we'll definitely hit that. And, it's funny. Lee Ving says, Azeez Al-Shaair, big shoes to fill. I did an interview with Azeez on the channel in December, right around the week of the playoff game with Dallas. And I was asking him, I'm like, free agency staring you in the face, and there's some other young bucks coming up here who can really play. And he singled out Marcelino as a guy that he thinks is really a player. And I agree with him wholeheartedly. I think Marcelino is going to make a huge impact. I can't wait to watch him this summer. And I can't wait to talk to him on Saturday. So we're really looking forward to having that conversation Saturday. I haven't decided if we'll do it live and go with the audience, or if we'll tape it and then release it. We'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll talk to Marcelino what he prefers. But that's coming up Saturday. And we got a whole slew of new videos coming out as well on the Niners, on the Giants, on the Warriors. So check out the Krueger Show. My son, Kevin Krueger, doing a bang-up job, working his summer job and producing the Krueger Show channel for me, and he's doing a phenomenal job. We also have some big announcements coming in the next, let's say, 2 weeks on the channel. We'll just tease that right there. I'll put it right there, and we'll come back to that. But we're very excited about some of the things that we're getting ready to announce coming up later on this month. So training camp will be here shortly. Thanks to Jack. Thanks to all of you. Thanks for the people who contributed to the Super Chats. Digital Drew, I saw that you bought some merchandise. You'll be getting a video from me and my son coming up here in the next 24 hours. So thanks to everybody. Have a great rest of your Friday. Beautiful weather in Northern California. And check us out tonight after the Giants game for a little post-game Giants with the great Ned Coletti. Until then, peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle. Yeah.